You wake up and check your phone for the time. Signal bars, a weather app, a dozen notifications. You've never once had to wonder which direction is north, but strip all of that away. Drop you into the middle of the Amazon rainforest, alone with nothing. What actually happens to your mind and body in the next 72 hours is far stranger than anything a survival movie has shown you. The Amazon is not empty. It is loud. It is nearly 6 million square kilometers of green, and less than 1% of it has ever felt a human footprint. Within the first 10 minutes, your brain does something you don't choose. It panics quietly before you even notice. Psychologist John Leach spent decades studying how people behave in life-threatening situations, and he found something counterintuitive. Most people do not fight. Most people do not run. About 75% freeze completely, unable to make a single useful decision. Leach called this the period of relative helplessness. Your ancestors needed this pause. It kept them still while a predator's eyes swept past them in the grass. But in a jungle with no predator in sight, that same freeze becomes your first real enemy. Why does your own mind work against you at the exact moment you need it most? Because the brain evolved for danger, not for survival math. It did not evolve to calculate calories or estimate distance to a river or ration daylight. It evolved to notice the rustle in the leaves. So while you stand frozen, the jungle keeps moving. Ants keep marching. Water keeps dripping toward a stream you cannot yet hear. And somewhere above you, in a canopy that blocks 80% of the sunlight, a howler monkey call travels for kilometers, a sound that early explorers mistook for a jaguar, or worse. Your first real decision has to be about water, not food. This surprises most people. The human body can survive for roughly 3 weeks without eating a single calorie. Without water, in tropical heat, you have closer to 2 or 3 days before organ failure begins. Physiologist Claude Piantadosi, who spent his career studying how the body responds to extreme environments, described dehydration as a silent accelerant. It doesn't just weaken you, it speeds up every other danger, clouding judgment before you even feel thirsty enough to notice. So you listen for water. Moving water is safer than still water, almost always. A trickling stream is less likely to carry parasites than a stagnant pool coated in a thin, green film. But even flowing water in the Amazon can carry giardia, or worse, so if you have any way to boil it, you do. If you don't, you drink it anyway, because dehydration will kill you faster than a parasite ever could. This is the first hard trade in a place that will hand you nothing but hard trades. What would you choose, water now or the risk of getting sick later? Most survival experts agree. You choose water now, always. The math of urgency wins over the math of comfort. Next comes shelter, and here the jungle punishes assumption. You might picture a canopy of leaves as protection from rain. It is not. Amazon storms are engineered to overwhelm exactly that kind of thinking. A single afternoon downpour can drop more rain in an hour than some deserts see in a year, and the canopy above you simply delays the water, then dumps it all at once in heavy cold sheets long after the sky outside looks clear again. Real jungle survival, the kind documented by explorers who lived through it, depends less on staying dry and more on staying off the ground. The forest floor is not solid earth waiting patiently beneath you. It is alive, and much of that life bites. One of the most cited real accounts of this comes from Yossi Ghinsberg, a young backpacker who became separated from his group deep in the Bolivian Amazon in 1981 and survived alone for 3 weeks before rescue. He described the nights as worse than the days, not because of jaguars or snakes, though both were real threats, but because of the sheer psychological weight of total isolation combined with a jungle that never goes quiet. Insects screamed. Rain hammered leaves like static. And in that noise, his mind began inventing threats that weren't there. This is where the Amazon becomes less a physical test and more a psychological one. Sensory deprivation researchers have long noted that when a threat cannot be clearly identified, the brain fills in the blanks, usually with something worse than reality. Explorers call it the jungle's hum, a low, constant static of insect and animal noise that never fully stops. After a few days, some survivors report their own mind manufacturing voices inside that hum, faint whispers stitched together from wind and rustling leaves. This isn't madness. It's a known effect of prolonged isolation paired with sensory overload, and understanding it is often the difference between someone who manages their fear and someone who is consumed by it. Could you tell the difference between an actual threat and one your own brain invented? Food becomes the next quiet crisis, and it arrives slower than you'd expect, but it arrives with a psychological cost most people underestimate. The Amazon is famously biodiverse, home to an estimated 10% of all known species on Earth, yet very little of that abundance is safely edible without specific knowledge. Bright colors on frogs and insects are not decoration. They are warning labels written by millions of years of evolution, and ignoring them is not brave, it's fatal. Palm fruits, certain nuts, and a handful of identifiable plants offer real calories. But for someone with no training, most of the jungle's biomass is functionally invisible as a food source. It exists all around you and you starve anyway, surrounded by more life than almost anywhere else on the planet. This is the twist most people never see coming. It's not the tigers of imagination, because there are none here. It's not even the anacondas or the jaguars, both real but rarely encountered by someone actively avoiding them. The greatest threat, statistically and psychologically, is the compounding effect of small failures. A blister that becomes infected because you couldn't keep your feet dry. A wrong turn that costs a day you didn't have. A moment of poor judgment because dehydration quietly stole your ability to reason clearly hours before you noticed you were thirsty. Survival researchers sometimes call this the cascade effect, where the danger is never one single dramatic event, but a slow accumulation of small, avoidable errors, each one making the next one more likely. Amanda Ripley, who studied disaster survival extensively, found this pattern again and again across wildly different environments, from plane crashes to natural disasters. The people who survive are rarely the strongest or the most prepared. They are the ones who keep making small, correct decisions over and over long after panic would have talked anyone else into giving up. There's also the matter of time and how quickly it stops behaving the way you expect. Without a phone, without a clock, without even a reliable sunrise breaking cleanly through dense canopy, your sense of how many days have passed starts to drift. Some stranded survivors have reported losing track by a full day or more within the first week. Not because they were confused, but because the usual anchors, meals, meetings, screens, simply weren't there to mark time's passing. Chronobiology researchers who study isolation, including work done on cave-dwelling test subjects cut off from daylight entirely, have found that without external cues, the human internal clock drifts to a rhythm closer to 25 hours than 24. Add a jungle's dim, filtered light, and that drift only grows. You might genuinely believe it's your fourth day when it's your sixth. That gap matters, because rescue searches are timed, rationing is timed, and your own hope has a shelf life that's easier to protect when you can actually measure it. Night changes everything again, and not in the way films portray it. It isn't the darkness itself that unsettles most people. It's the sound. During the day, the Amazon's noise is diffuse, a wash of insects and distant birds. At dusk, an entirely different shift happens. Nocturnal insects begin a chorus so loud that some recorded readings inside dense rainforest at night exceed the noise level of a busy street. Frogs answer them in bursts. Somewhere, always, something moves through the undergrowth close enough to hear, but too far to see. Explorers who lived through extended isolation in similar conditions have described this transition as the hardest part of each day to face, because it's the moment your mind has the least information and the most silence to fill it with worst-case guesses. Managing that first hour of full dark, staying still, breathing slow, resisting the urge to move toward every sound is its own quiet skill, one that has nothing to do with strength and everything to do with patience. There's a reason experienced guides in the region rarely seem rattled by any of this, and it isn't fearlessness, it's familiarity. What feels to you like chaos, an undifferentiated wall of green and noise, is to someone who has spent years there simply a landscape with landmarks. The way a city's skyline tells a local exactly where they are without needing a single street sign. That gap between chaos and pattern is almost entirely built from repeated exposure, not instinct. Which means the terror you'd feel on day one isn't a permanent state. It's simply what unfamiliarity feels like, magnified by isolation and stripped of any comforting distraction. So if you were actually there, alone in that green and endless noise, what would keep you alive wouldn't be some dramatic act of heroism. It would be almost boring. Find water first. Get off the ground before dark. Ration your energy instead of burning it on panic. Notice when your thinking starts to blur, because that blur is your body's warning system, not your imagination failing you. And here is the strange, quiet truth underneath all of it. You already carry the tools for this. Even now, even in a world with signal bars and weather apps, every time you choose to pause instead of panic, every time you make one small correct decision instead of spiraling toward the next 10 disasters your mind invents, you are running the exact same survival software your ancestors used to walk out of forests just like this one. The Amazon doesn't test your strength. It tests your patience with your own mind. And tonight, when you check your phone one more time before falling asleep in a room with walls and a door that locks, you are still, in some small way, making the same quiet decision that kept a stranded person alive in a jungle a world away. Stay calm, choose the next right thing, then the next. Because the real answer to what if you were stranded in the Amazon jungle alone was never about the jungle at all. It was about how well you know your own mind before it has a chance to work against you.